How to deal with religious zealots proclaiming extraterrestrials are demons. David Adair Interview Part 1, Rocket Building as a Child Prodigy. Elena Danaan on Enki and the Teachings of Jesus. David Grusch claims the gutting of the UAP Disclosure Act is the greatest legislative failure in US history. Tucker Carlson reveals UFOs is one of two issues that scares him the most. Tucker Carlson interviews David Grusch on UFO disclosure. The Nordics and Inner Earthers take control of space arks. Did Senator Chuck Schumer support the UAP Disclosure Act knowing it would be gutted in the US House of Representatives? More insiders are coming forward claiming there's an official cover-up of extraterrestrial life and contact has been made. The NDAA Act for 2024 passes both houses, both chambers of Congress, and now heads to the White House for passage, establishing a UAP Records for the first time. The Y-Files does an episode on the Book of Enoch and pre-flood legends of extraterrestrial contact.
You're listening to Exopolitics Today with Dr. Michael Salla, your source for the uncensored truth regarding the human, extraterrestrial, global, and political agenda. Click the like button and subscribe to this channel. And now, here's Dr. Michael Salla.
Welcome to this December 16 edition of Exopolitics Today, the week in review. It definitely has been a very interesting week with the passage of the remnants of the UAP Disclosure Act and different people commenting about the significance of that, but a lot of other exopolitics relevant stories. So I wanted to begin with this story that I posted on my Twitter feed. Again, for those of you that want to click the links or follow the stories that I'm discussing, just go to x.com or twitter.com/Michael Salla. So this is a story that I thought was very interesting because it shows what lies ahead with UFO disclosure, that many religious zealots are going to come forward claiming that extraterrestrials are demons and are part of a satanic antichrist agenda. So let's watch this particular video clip that it gives us one example of what we can expect to happen in the future coming from this very committed religious zealot crowd.
Either landed or crashed.
We have spacecraft from another species.
We do, yeah.
How many?
Quite a number.
Quite a number over the last 50 to 70 years. UFOs or UAPs, unknown aerial phenomenon. UFOs, UAPs, aliens, gray men, and others are a part of the Satan's and the Antichrist's plan to deceive humanity.
There you have this very extreme viewpoint, and I don't know how prevalent it is amongst religious zealots. There's Christian evangelicals, but I'm sure you'll find the same thinking among other Abrahamic religions, whether we're talking about Judaism, whether we're talking about Islam. There will be a minority that claim that extraterrestrials are demons and are part of some satanic agenda. And, how do you deal with that? Education. I mean, all you can do is to just continue to put out accurate information, and hopefully people like this will eventually understand that there's more than one side of the ledger, but it really is going to be a problem for the future. And because disclosure is coming, people are going to learn that extraterrestrials are real. I think a vast majority of the population are going to rejoice with the news. but there's going to be a significant minority that believe these extraterrestrials are demonic and part of some satanic agenda. And yeah, that's something we just need to be prepared for and deal with if we're not already dealing with it. In case you have someone in your family line that thinks you're demonic because you are believing in extraterrestrials and you are demonic. I'm sure that probably happens to some poor unfortunate people that are born into families where you have these types of characters. Right, now I want to look at this first part of an interview series I did with David Adair. So we're really setting the foundations here. This first interview, part one, really just covers the early years of David Adair's creation of rockets, and it sets the foundations for what happens later. So we discuss his relationship with the former four-star General Curtis LeMay, who was the Air Force Chief of Staff. And we also discuss how he won prizes for his rocket engines. And so there's a lot of documentation, a lot of newspaper stories covering it. So, the thing about David Adair is that he is someone who has a lot of documentation. I mean, he's got an incredible story about his encounter with an extraterrestrial spacecraft at Area 51, and we'll be discussing that in depth in part two. But part one sets up the groundwork for that and gives us a lot of information about how he got interested in rocket engine development, how he was tied in through his father to the establishment of NASCAR racing, that he was a prodigy, and so he would come up with these innovative engine designs that the NASCAR engineers would benefit from. And so they, in gratitude, they said, well, you're a miner, we can't pay you, so what do you want? And he said, well, can I use your workshops? And they said, sure, go ahead. And so he used these workshops to build his first rocket engines. And then later on, because he was beginning to win these prizes, he came to the attention of General Curtis LeMay. And Curtis LeMay was so impressed with the electromagnetic fusion containment engine that David Adair developed that he arranged for Air Force technicians to provide support and resources for David Adair to build a larger rocket. And so David Adair won prizes for that rocket. And so this is all documented, and also the relationship with David Adair, between David Adair and Curtis LeMay, is supported by documentation that David shared with me, where it shows that his mother worked as a nurse at the same hospital where Curtis LeMay's father, Irving, was being treated and died. And that's how Curtis LeMay met with the mother of David Adair, and how eventually he got to learn through her of David Adair's rocket building engines. So part one is released. Part two will be available. We plan to release that on Monday, December 18. So here's a webinar by Elena Danaan, and you can register for her or watch the webinar recordings after the fact. And this is, to my mind, a very important webinar because it gives a overview of the importance of the symbolism of the fish found in Sumerian cuneiform texts and early Christianity, and showing that there was some very common principles and beliefs there. And she shows the genetic bloodline connection between Yeshua and Ea, or Enki, and its relevance for this kind of fish symbolism that you find throughout early Christianity and also in the Sumerian texts. And Christ consciousness. What is that, and how is that connected to all this fish symbolism? So she discusses all of that. And I think she makes a very important point that the symbol of the fish that the early Christians used, because of what it represented, is a much better symbol for the love and wisdom teachings of Yeshua, of Jesus, than the cross, which represents the suffering and crucifixion of Jesus. And I think she makes a good case that the cross, the symbolism of the cross, was really a way for the deep state, or the dark ones, the cabal, the Illuminati, to hijack early Christianity and to set it on a path away from the love and wisdom teachings of Jesus, towards a more control agenda, which would be based on the symbolism of suffering and crucifixion, and developing a control hierarchy. So definitely worth examining. And she also talks about the Adamic DNA blueprint that's expressed through fish symbolism, and this and achieving Christ consciousness. So well worth listening to that. Okay, so here is some of the reactions to the gutting of the UAP Disclosure Act that occurred a week ago, when a joint committee conference that reconciled the two different versions of the National Defense Authorization Act for 2024 that incorporated the UAP Act, they reconciled that, and in the reconciliation process, the UAP Disclosure Act was gutted. Its most important provisions were ruled out. And according to David Grusch, who by now I think you're all very familiar with him, he believes that this was the greatest legislative failure in American history. I mean, very powerful words. And I think that this is something that is going to trigger more whistleblowers coming forward to reveal everything they know, because now the controlled disclosure process that the UAP Disclosure Act spelled out, because that's really what it was. It was a controlled disclosure process that would enable whistleblowers to come forward and reveal what they know, and for that all to come out into the public arena in a way that was going to be controlled by this 9-person review board that was going to be set up to get all the UAP records from different military intelligence organizations, and importantly from corporations, and then through consultation with the president, release that to the public. That's gone. And so with that gone, now what's left is a uncontrolled, or what has been referred to as a catastrophic UAP disclosure process, where more whistleblowers will come forward and just reveal everything in a kind of uncoordinated way. So, and maybe David Grusch is going to be playing a role in this, because he's now saying that he actually has some first-hand knowledge of the UAP programs, the UFO programs. So that's David Grusch. So that's David Grusch. We hear just a little snippet of him talking about this catastrophic, talking about this this legislative failure being the greatest in US history. Okay, so let's move on here. Okay, so this was a very interesting interview with Senator Mike Rounds. He's one of the two senators that co-sponsored the Senate version of the UAP Disclosure Act, and he expresses his disappointment with its gutting, but then talks up the establishment of a UAP Records Collection outside of the purview of the Pentagon and intelligence community. And what that means is that right now, if you wanted to get your hands on any of the UAP records, you would have to submit a FOIA request to the Pentagon, to the particular military service, whether it's the Air Force, the Navy, Space Force, and say, oh, well, I want all records that you have pertinent to this UFO incident that happened, say, in 2014, involving the USS Nimitz or earlier cases. And so that record would be housed in the FOIA collection of that military service. Well, now with the passage of this UAP Disclosure Act, all those records now move over to the National Archives. So that'll expedite the process for a lot of these records becoming available. It means that there's going to be one central clearinghouse instead of you having to kind of go on a fishing expedition applying to say the Defense Intelligence Agency or to the FBI or to the Air Force to find out about a particular incident. Say you're interested in, say, the 1948 Aztec UFO crash, and you want to find, well, what does the FBI have on this? What does the Air Force have on this? So did the Army get anything? And Department of Energy, did they get anything? So rather than having to apply to all these different organizations, now you just can apply to the National Archives for all the records. So that is actually a step forward, but that is a small step forward, really, compared to what the UAP Disclosure Act had. But what is the main takeaway from this interview with Mike Rounds is that he says that this is only the start of the legislative process, and there will be more UFO bills that will be coming forward in the future. These will probably be kind of like standalone bills that will try to establish a review panel to get its hands on UFO records and have with subpoena power and so forth. So this is the start of the process. So he's kind of talking up what was achieved through the result of this reconciliation committee. Okay, so here we have a segment that Tucker Carlson did on Redacted, and he discusses how the UFO scares him the most because of its deeper layers that involve a dark spiritual component that most people will have trouble with. So he didn't go into great depth into what that dark component is. So we can guess one of those may well be that extraterrestrials created humans in multiple genetic experiments. I mean, for a lot of people, that's going to be an existential shock, because people that are brought up within a religious upbringing believe that a God described in the Bible or the Talmud or the Jewish texts or the Quran created humans, and now we're going to find out that through this UFO disclosure that's coming, that humans are genetic experiments. Probably the abduction phenomenon. Millions of people have been abducted by some of these UFOs. Grey extraterrestrials, reptilian extraterrestrials have been involved with those. Praying mantis extraterrestrials have been involved with those, conducting genetic experiments. Souls are extracted as a commodity for an extraterrestrial trade. This is something that I first heard going back to the 1990s when Alex Collier talked about the Dows, or what he describes as the Greys, actually extracting the souls from children who presumably had been killed, their souls extracted, and their souls were put into some kind of container, and they were being shipped off planet for export as a trade. I mean, you probably have heard of a slave trade where physical bodies, a person physically is taken to work some mine off planet or taken as a food source. I mean, kind of horrible stories about the slave trade. But here, where you actually have a soul extracted or the consciousness extracted from one's physical body, put into some kind of receptacle, and then that's transferred into another body that's used by extraterrestrial for whatever reason. I mean, that's also one of these very dark elements. And that humanity is kind of like traded or watched over by different extraterrestrial organizations. I mean, we are aware of, you can go back to the very beginning of the Sumerian records and you look at the Enuma Elish, and it talks about a council. It talks about an assembly of the gods, which we can consider to be a council of the extraterrestrials, the Anunnaki in particular, who approved the creation of humanity and approved various ways of handling humanity, whether it was Enlil seeking a permission to launch a great flood to wipe out humanity because the humanity was too noisy for him, according to the Atrahasis, and causing a commotion. So exactly what that means, we can speculate about that. But all of these are very kind of dark elements, and Tucker Carlson says they scare him the most. So very interesting. Okay, so there's an interview that Dr. Gary Nolan, who is a professor in the Stanford University School of Medicine, and he this extract or this interview actually came out in 2002, where he talked about his knowledge of whistleblowers coming forward, and presumably that that was a reference to David Grusch and others coming forward. Now, in the full interview, what he said I found to be very interesting was that he doesn't believe that UFOs are visitors from other solar systems, nor does he believe that they involve reverse engineered anti-gravity craft built by governments, military, corporations. He instead favors the interdimensional hypothesis that was first proposed by Jacques Vallée. So, that's very curious, because I have certainly, in my 9-volume series now, yes, that's hard to believe, I've got 9 volumes now. My Secret Space Program series spans 9 volumes, and I have extensive evidence in there, whether we're talking about whistleblowers, insiders, talking about documents, photos, leaked documents, FOIA documents, all providing evidence that we do have secret space programs that have been reverse engineered from captured extraterrestrial spacecraft, that there have been agreements with the extraterrestrials who have arrived in these spacecraft, that they are physical vehicles that land at Air Force bases, and that there's been interaction and meetings and so forth. And I suspect that the interdimensional hypothesis that Jacques Vallée proposed was kind of like a misdirection, I believe. And it's interesting that Ross Coulthard is going down that track as well. Now, that's not to say I don't believe extraterrestrials are interdimensional, that some of this phenomenon is not interdimensional. I think that's truly the case. But to say that the whole phenomenon is an interdimensional one, I think that may be a misdirection. And Gary Nolan is promoting that. Okay, so here we have an interview that David Grusch did with Tucker Carlson. And this interview is very significant because Tucker Carlson has an audience of millions around the world. I'm actually not quite sure how many Twitter followers he has. We might actually see Tucker Carlson. How many Twitter followers? He's got 10 million Twitter followers. There you go. 11 million, really. So that's a very large audience that follow his stories. And so now he's actually presented to his audience David Grusch, who is now kind of like the poster boy for this UFO disclosure movement, in terms of a highly credentialed insider that's very articulate and speaking about his knowledge of these UFO special access programs involving recovered extraterrestrial technologies, involving biological artifacts or tissue samples that are being studied, extraterrestrials themselves. So Tucker Carlson interviews David Grusch on his Tucker Carlson network. And so to me, this is like a lot of people are now getting red-pilled. Millions of people are getting red-pilled about the UFO issue. All of a sudden, it's an important issue because Tucker Carlson says it's an important issue. And Joe Rogan has also covered the issues, but I don't think Joe Rogan has the same cultural impact as Tucker Carlson does in the United States. I think Joe Rogan definitely has a very big audience. I think it's in the tens of millions as well. But I suspect that his audience is very different to Tucker's audience that are much more interested in kind of like mainstream political issues. So for Tucker Carlson to bring this out of the box UFO issue to his audience is very important, because now all of a sudden millions of people are going to be looking into this UFO phenomenon, trying to find out what's going on. Okay, so in here, I made a point of saying that it's very interesting that Tucker Carlson is interviewing David Grusch and others, but it's well worth emphasizing that David Grusch himself doesn't have much firsthand experience with these covert programs. I mean, he says he's seen firsthand some of the classified files, so he does have firsthand experience of the existence of UFO-related programs, but he himself has not been involved in any UFO-related projects. Whereas JP, who is someone I've discussed in my 2 latest Secret Space Program books, he's been exposed to a lot of missions, both off-world and on-world. He's gone to the inner Earth. He's been taken to space bases. He's met with inner Earth civilizations, Nordics. He's been taken off-planet to bases on Ganymede. He's been part of these deep space missions with Space Command that went out to meet the arrival of these fleets of extraterrestrials in the middle, or kind of like September, October of 2021. So far, JP's information doesn't seem to be something that is drawing a lot of attention from people that are interested in David Grusch's testimony. It seems that for them, David Grusch opens the door, but I think as you open that door wider and go into this phenomenon more, then you're going to eventually have to deal with the kind of missions that people like JP are reporting on. Okay, so here's JP's latest mission. This is his 6th mission to the Atlantic Space Ark. So here he describes how these Nordics and Inner Earthers take control of the space arks. This is his 6th mission to that particular space ark. And this is significant because he says that this particular space ark was moved from waters that were part of the Bermuda Triangle deeper into the Atlantic Ocean for the purpose of making it much more of an international venture and taking it out of the hands of the US, because the US Navy, when that space ark was found at the bottom of the Bermuda Triangle, the US Navy had established a presence there and it was pretty much in control. So by moving it into international waters or deeper Atlantic waters, the idea, according to what JP was told, was that this would internationalize it more and also give humanity a pause, or maybe it's more correct to say the covert programs running these secret programs give them a pause to kind of like say, okay, you can't just expect to have access to these technologies, that these technologies, you need to kind of like develop a certain level of cooperation and a certain level of responsibility for the planet. And I think they're looking at our planet, and they're looking at all of the fighting, the infighting that is happening between different countries, black hats, white hats, and they're probably looking at all of that, and they're looking at the consciousness of the planet and saying, well, humanity is at a very precarious level. So let's take these space arks and let's occupy them. Let's take control of them for a little while. We'll activate them, use whatever surface humans are available to help activate the space arks. And as surface humanity gets to kind of reconcile or come to some kind of cooperative framework, then yes, then they will be given custody of the space ark. So I think this is kind of like an important message from these Nordics. Now, who are these Nordics? JP's been on multiple inner Earth missions where he's seen Nordic civilizations, and some of these Nordics appear to be hybrids. That is, that they come from other star systems such as the Pleiades, and they have been on Earth for a long time. And when I say being on Earth for a long time, I'm talking about in the inner Earth for a long time. And whether it's through inner breeding, or whether it's through them being here for a long, long time, now we can say that there are a certain race of Nordics, hybrids, that are in the inner Earth, and they have an interest in what's happening on the surface of the planet. And I think they're very concerned about the possibility that some of those arc technologies could be misused. And so I think they're probably lobbying or even directly participating in ensuring these space arcs are not going to be misused. So very interesting. So that's JP's latest update. Okay, so here we have Senators Chuck Schumer and Mike Rounds commenting on the failure of the House of Representatives. And by that, we're really talking about the Republican leadership in the House of Representatives to pass the UAP Disclosure Act. And they're both talking up the creation of this UAP Records Collection in the National Archives. Now, I find this very interesting because in the Senate, this UAP Disclosure Act was proposed and passed unanimously. There was no dissent. And yet when it went to the House of Representatives, Chuck Schumer, the Senate leader for the Democrats, did nothing to lobby for its passage in the House of Representatives. And which is very interesting because there have been a few people that have looked into that and found that if the UAP Disclosure Act was so important for Chuck Schumer as he claims, then why didn't he lobby for the leaders in the House of Representatives, like Hakeem Jeffries, the minority leader for the House of Representatives? Why didn't he lobby him and other Democrats in the House of Representatives for the passage of the UAP Disclosure Act? Why didn't that happen? And so that does kind of like, I believe, raise a legitimate question. That is that Chuck Schumer, the senator, even though he proposed and had this UAP Act passed in the Senate, he knew that it would be killed in the House of Representatives, and that this was some kind of maneuver in a way that would set up something. And here I give some scenarios for what could have been. So this is speculation about the motivations of Chuck Schumer. Some people will take exception, say, no, Chuck Schumer, he really cares about the UFO issue and he really wants to get it passed. And, he's been working on this issue since, the early 2000s when he hung out with John Podesta and Hillary Clinton and those and that crowd. Those are people who have, let's say, very questionable relationships with very young, small people. If you know what I'm alluding to there. So what kind of scenario is going on here? One possibility is that this could set the stage for a renewed submission of the UAP Disclosure Act as a standalone bill in the House and the Senate. So this was passed in the Senate. It was gutted. Well, it wasn't adopted in the House and then gutted in the Reconciliation Committee. So now the next step might be that it's resubmitted as a standalone bill in both the House and Senate, and then passed. So that's one possibility. That's what Chuck Schumer and Mike Rounds are suggesting. Now, B is the option that I think is worth looking at, and that is using UFOs as a distraction from Joe Biden scandals and other things concerning young, small people. And the failing of the Ukraine policy, that Ukraine, the Biden administration's support of Ukraine is starting to unravel because people are seeing that Ukraine was not able to achieve a military victory over Russia, which was from the very beginning a non-starter. But yet you had people in the US administration, the Biden administration, different European countries saying that Ukraine could, with Western backing, impose a military solution on its Donbass problem on Russia, which experts said from the get-go was nonsense. That would never happen. And so now we're seeing the truth of that. And of course, in the process, Ukraine has been thoroughly wrecked with up to estimates are 500,000 men have been killed. And then you have a lot of other casualties in Ukraine. So it's been a disaster for Ukraine. And finally, a false flag, a UFO event. Could that be what this maneuver that Chuck Schumer has conducted with his proposing of the UAP Disclosure Act and then doing nothing about it? It's like fathering a child and then not acknowledging or just ignoring the child as it goes through life. The legislative life of a bill. So a false flag UFO event. Could this be something that the deep state tries to pull off? I think people are still believing that is what's coming. I think the deep state still has some cards to play. And one of those cards is a UFO false flag event. Okay, more highly credentialed insiders are coming forward to reveal that there is a UFO cover-up, that extraterrestrial contact has been made. So here you have a senator, and so I can play this clip. We'll play this clip for you. It's only 23 seconds, and so you can hear this admiral, this retired admiral of the U.S. Navy, Tim Gallaudet,
who's basically come out publicly and said, you think this is real? Why do you think there is this cover-up? What are they concealing?
I think it's about time that we do disclose that we are in contact with non-human intelligence. That's what needs to be put out there in the public.
So there you have a highly credentialed former admiral with the US Navy saying that contact has been made and that there is a UFO cover-up. So that, I think, is very important. It just shows the beginning of what we can expect with this catastrophic disclosure scenario that now is starting to present itself as insiders realize that Congress is not taking action to present to the American public and the world public the truth of what's going on. So they're going to start coming forward and reveal what they know. So I think this is a very exciting development. Okay, so on Thursday, December 14, both houses of the US Congress actually passed the National Defense Authorization Act for 2024 that includes the provisions for the creation of a UAP Records Collection inside of the National Archives that would be dedicated to the UFO issue. So, that's what remains, pretty much what remains of the gutted UAP Disclosure Act. And so any UFO records that are older than 25 years, they are required to be handed over to the National Archives for them to establish this UFO records collection. Now, the problem, though, is that there's no enforcement mechanism, that the archivist at the National Archives has no enforcement mechanism to get the Navy or to get any military service or to get to any intelligence service to hand over any UFO files that they have. They have to rely on that military service or intelligence, the intelligence community, to hand over whatever they can if it's older than 25 years. But they can't enforce that. And most importantly, corporations are excluded. So corporations that handle the brunt of the research and development of captured UFO technologies and extraterrestrial biological entities, they're not compelled at all. This UAP Records Collection that's been established, it doesn't apply to them at all. And so the FOIA process, Freedom of Information Act process, doesn't apply to them either. So in a way, all we have is kind of a strengthening of the FOIA through this records collection that's going to be established in the US Congress. And so it'll be easier for people to get access to these records, but there's no way to pressure any military agents or intelligence agency to hand over those records. And here's a detailed summary. This is an article that appears. Douglas Dean Johnson, who follows UFO legislation through the US Congress pretty closely. So he's put out a lot of articles examining this in detail. So he's got an article here that goes into depth into what was actually adopted into this National Defense Authorization Act for 2024 that deals with the UFO or UAP issue. So yeah, I recommend, if you want to dive deep into that, that's an article to take a look at. So now we go to the final story that I thought was worth taking a look at for this week in review. And this is an episode of the Y-Files. And the Y-Files, he has 3 million YouTube followers. So has quite a audience there where a lot of very interesting issues are presented. So in this particular episode, the Y-Files examines possible alien encounters in biblical texts and looks closely at the Book of Enoch and Legends of Noah's Ark. Now, what the Book of Enoch describes are contact experiences aboard extraterrestrial spacecraft. So this is something that the Y-Files kind of like takes a look at. Now, what I believe the Book of Enoch represents is that Enoch was taken aboard these motherships or space arks where he got to meet with different extraterrestrials. He got to experience vast ecosystems. So when you're talking about vast ecosystems, you're talking about very large kind of natural preserves in space. That's a space ark. So Enoch was taken to see these space arks. He got to see ancient technology, spoke to the space commanders. I mean, he was talking about the kind of like the senior hierarchy that's described in the book of Enoch. We're talking about these senior angels. Angels, I think, is just another term for extraterrestrial. And all this happened before the Younger Dryas flood event that destroyed Atlantis. And in the Y files, what is revealed about Noah is that Noah was a very interesting figure. And the Y files talks about Noah as someone being born with very unusual bright eyes and light emanating from him. And his father, Lamech, didn't believe that Noah was his son. And so he asked his father, Methuselah, who is Noah? I mean, he's a very unusual child. Methuselah said, no, he is your son, but he has some very unusual abilities. So Noah was an enlightened being, someone that was born with, I think, with this knowledge of space arks. And so when Noah reached adulthood and you had the flood about to be unleashed, then what I think was going on was that Noah, it wasn't that Noah knew or was instructed on how to build a wooden boat, which is what we get in the sort of the traditional biblical narrative, that Noah actually knew how to activate and gain access to space arks, that these are very ancient extraterrestrial technologies that have lain dormant on planet Earth for millennia, and that when needed, they appear, and that there are a certain percentage or portion of the population that know how to access these. These are the starseeds. So I think Noah was one of these people. And so Noah was able to access the space ark there in that region of the Middle East. And we have similar stories, and the Y Files does a good job in presenting these other stories from around the world. And there's roughly 250 flood stories from around the world. So similar scenarios to Noah, where these kind of like enlightened beings built these wooden boats and then evacuated the population and animals and so forth. And I think that's just the way in which the ancients described these events that happened a long, long time ago, because we're talking about the Great Flood being the end of the Younger Dryas period, which was around 9,600 BC, which is when Atlantis was destroyed, according to Plato. So Atlantis is destroyed. At that time, there were these advanced technologies. Atlantis was a spacefaring civilization and had colonies all over the world. So people knew about spacecraft. And so I believe Noah and his contemporaries around the world knew about spacecraft. They knew about space arks, and they knew how to activate these so that as the Great Flood approached, they were able to activate the space arks, gain entry, and provide safe passage to people and to all of the animals. Well, maybe not so much the animals, but the genetic information from the different animals onto these huge space arks. So the bottom line is that space arks are not a myth. These are advanced technologies that have lain dormant for millennia but are now activating. And it's important to emphasize that, as far as I can tell, the two primary functions of the space arks are, one, their original mission is that they are used to seed new civilizations, that they arrive in a world and their technology is used to seed a civilization. That's how Atlantis, its major city, Poseidon, I believe, in the middle of the Atlantic, was built above a space ark. And so this is the way in which these space arks operate. that they're used to seed civilizations, and technologies from them are very advanced and very powerful, and they can be used for that purpose. And their second function is that at the end of a civilization, during some kind of cataclysmic series of events, the space arks can be used to evacuate large numbers of people. So that takes us to the present moment. What is happening right now? Are we headed towards a new planetary civilization where these space ark technologies are going to be used to seed a much more advanced technological age for our planet? That's certainly the dominant timeline that I think we are headed on. But there is this other possibility that the arks may be used for evacuation purposes, because that's their second function, evacuation, in case the timeline gets shifted so far. And I think that there's an organic consciousness on the space arks, and the different extraterrestrial groups that are monitoring the space arks, that they are looking at humanity's collective consciousness, and they're making decisions and like, where's humanity heading? Are we heading towards an age of awakening, of kind of like transparency, cooperation, peace, or is humanity headed down another path? And I think that their view of timelines is much more dynamic than ours, that I think that they look at the consciousness and they say, well, at any point, the timeline can diverge if humanity collectively doesn't make the right choices. So right now, it means that the more we get into that place of doing the things that bring you joy, to be in a place of integrity with our own purpose, to kind of promote peace and cooperation with others, love and share the wisdom, raising your vibration as high as possible, then that helps us stay on this primary timeline of space arks being used to help us get kickstarted into a new galactic age, or a Star Trek future, if you like. Okay, so those are the stories I wanted to cover for the Week in Review this week. Again, if you want to get the links to all of these stories, just go to my Twitter feed. Don't forget to subscribe to the exopolitics.org mail list, so that's the way you can be notified of new updates. I do 3 podcasts every week now, typically 2 interviews and a Week in Review every week. So if you want to be notified about those, then just join my mail list on exopolitics.org, or you can go to exopoliticstoday.com for all of that. And don't forget to click like and share for this podcast, because YouTube has algorithms in place that does seem to suppress this kind of news from getting out, this information from getting out. So the more you like and share, the easier it is for others to learn about this information. So thank you for watching, and aloha.
You have been listening to Exopolitics Today with Dr. Michael Salla. Please remember to like, share, and subscribe to this channel. Join or start a conversation in the comments. Take the time to explore the vast library of best-selling books, webinars, and podcasts by Dr. Salla. Visit exopoliticstoday.com.